Some. Hi, and welcome everyone to this month's The Garden Hour with MU Extension. My name is Debbie Kelly. I'm a field specialist in horticulture and the State Extension Master Gardener Coordinator. And as we always say every time we meet, that we're happy to have you here. It's been a while since we visited with you all, and we do have some things. The garden is still growing in some areas where I know we had heavy frost last night and probably across most of the state, I'm going to assume. I put my stuff under protection and they looked okay this morning when I checked on them. So I'm going to wait till the weather gets just a little bit warmer today and this afternoon and stick my stuff back out again. So it's always an interesting time in the fall when the weather changes like this. But I think Zach's going to give us some information on what to expect over the next couple of weeks at least. So I want to go ahead and show you. We have an updated map here. You will notice that we have filled one of our positions here down in the Boot Heel area of our state. So Traven Crocker is our new horticulture specialist located in Poplar Bluff. She's on today, and we're going to have her introduce herself after Zach is done there. So again, all of our names, all of our emails. We're always happy to answer your questions. If by chance you're in a county with an open position, don't worry about it. Just reach out to any one of us and we'll be happy to answer your questions or direct you to who will be able to answer your questions for you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the presentation and I'm going to turn it over to Zach, and he's going to talk about our weather.
Great. Thank you, Debbie, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad the calendar worked out well today because what we have here is we can do our monthly weather summary the morning after our first statewide widespread freeze. And so as Debbie mentioned, a lot of us woke up to frost on our cars or maybe on the grass this morning, and pretty much all of Missouri got below the freezing mark. This table here shows some of our coolest temperatures from this morning. And I wanted to show this because quite a few spots here, and if you look at the counties, really pretty widespread, got below 28 degrees, which is typically seen as the definition for a hard freeze. And then if we look at Berry and Shannon County, getting more into the Ozarks and some higher elevation areas, the big winner this morning with a minimum temperature of 24 degrees. And so it was pretty interesting that this was our first widespread freeze because looking at the calendar, it really aligned pretty well with when we usually see that first freeze date on average. And so those who have been watching the Garden Hour for a while are probably pretty familiar with this map, but this is some previous research that's been done where we've looked at old historical weather data and calculated on average when is that first freeze or night with temperature getting below 32 degrees during the fall. And so you can see here in northern Missouri, hit that first freeze right on schedule, maybe a week ahead of schedule here in central Missouri, but same with the Ozarks there, right on schedule. Now, the only parts of the state that didn't get below freezing last night was the St. Louis metro, because of a kind of an urban heat island, keeping you all a bit warmer, and then farther down to the southeast in the Boot Heel. But traditionally, we see that freeze a couple weeks later than the rest of the state in those areas. Now, the other story coming with our freeze here is over the past month, where's the rain? We were doing well this summer and started to dry out in September. But October is virtually off to a completely dry start so far. So this map really looks at the entire Midwest, but this shows the number of days since our last measurable precipitation. So at least 1/100th of an inch. And we can see up in the upper Midwest where you see these blues, areas where it's rained this week in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, for example. But when we start moving to the Southwest here in Missouri, when we see the green here, most of the state has not seen a drop of rain in 15 to 21 days. Here in Columbia, I know we're on day 21 and counting. So very dry weather as of late. And so here we can see our rainfall so far this month in October. only a few spots have really picked up anything. Really, the only notable rainfalls in far northeast Missouri and Clark County, but most of us have been completely dry here. And this is unusual. A lot of people have asked, is this normal for our fall season in Missouri? Well, what we do see is during the fall, looking at our average monthly precipitation, this is the time of year we start drying out a little bit. So our average monthly precipitation in September is around 4 inches, but in October it's around 3 inches. So we do end up drying out this month and into the winter, but still expect around 3 inches of rainfall. So clearly well behind the normal for October so far. And if we look at our temperatures so far in October, running ahead of or warmer than normal, even with the frost overnight. We've had several days with especially those high temperatures above normal. So here we see most locations 3 to 4 degrees above normal, a little bit cooler in Cape Girardeau, but still warmer there. And of course, with all of the lack of rainfall, really since the end of August, we've seen in kind of an explosion in coverage and severity on the U.S. Drought Monitor map here. So I'll show on the left, this is the most recent update as of October 8th, and we can see most of the state in some kind of shade of abnormally dry, quite a bit of moderate drought, but then some oranges and reds showing severe and extreme drought in western and southwest Missouri, where we're really starting to see those precipitation deficits accumulate there. And if we look on the right, this is our 6-week change in the drought monitor. If you're in eastern or southeast Missouri, those are really the only spots that have gotten better with some of the rainfall from Francine and Helene. But the rest of the state, most of us are worse off on drought status than we were 6 weeks ago, as shown with some of the yellows and oranges there. So certainly some drought concerns, and we'll see this map updated again tomorrow morning. Now, looking ahead, I'll try and break down if we have a chance for rain, but also potentially another chance of a frost and freeze tonight. And so on the left here, we can see our current watches, warnings, and advisories. There was a freeze warning for almost all of Missouri last night into this morning. Now it looks like more of just southeast Missouri. And if we look at the forecast lows on the right, not as cold as last night. So still getting down to around freezing in the mid 30s, but it doesn't look like widespread temperatures below the freezing mark like we saw last night. So more of probably a patchy frost event, again, especially down in the Ozarks and southeast Missouri, but still another chilly night ahead. So you definitely might want to cover that sensitive vegetation, especially in southeast Missouri. But then we're going to kind of start a slow warm up here through the rest of the week and into the weekend. So after tonight, really our frost and freeze concerns are gone. So on the left here, if we look at our high temperatures on Thursday, we're going to rebound pretty well into the afternoon with highs getting to around 70 and then much warmer overnight lows Thursday night into Friday. So still see some mid 30s in the Ozarks, but a lot of the state remaining near 40 or warmer overnight. Now, what's causing this kind of warm up? Well, what we'll see over the next few days is winds out of the south and some pretty strong winds. And so that's what's going to bring our warmer temperatures here, but also a combination of all of this dryness, pretty low relative humidity, and high winds is going to create a few days with an elevated fire risk. And so here, this map shows our forecast wind speeds or wind gusts, excuse me, Thursday through Friday, northwest Missouri up to 30 miles an hour. And so this is why on the left, the Storm Prediction Center is placed mainly northwest Missouri in an elevated to critical fire risk for tomorrow. And I think we'll see that on Friday as well. So expect some of those red flag warnings. And please prolong any burning you might have to do during these fire weather days because there's definitely a risk for the ignition and spread of those fires. But once those winds settled out over the weekend, we'll see conditions kind of calm down, but the warm temperatures are going to stick around. And so looking at Saturday, Sunday, and Monday here, looks really pleasant. So clear skies, temperatures in the mid 70s, a little bit above average. But unfortunately, another kind of clear weekend and not a sign of rain. And so when is our next chance of rain? I'll show these maps here, which shows the predicted rainfall totals on Monday and Tuesday of next week. That's our next shot of rain. But honestly, this forecast is looking pretty pitiful for our rain chances. If we look at Monday, you see a lot of green in Missouri, but that's less than 1/10 of an inch of rain. So not a lot of heavier totals with this, maybe 1/10 to 1/4 inch northwest of St. Joseph's, for example, but not any real measurable rainfall. Same on Tuesday as well. So hopefully that forecast changes, but right now it looks more like clouds with some showers and less of a significant rainfall event. And then to kind of finish off, looking ahead to finish out October, looking on the left here, the forecast from the Climate Prediction Center is for warmer than average temperatures to continue for all of Missouri. And then on the right, maybe some good news. So we see some green on this map for the first time in a while, but this is indicating in that 8 to 14 day period, not a strong possibility, but at least leaning towards above normal precipitation. So could be watching a system in that second week that could finally bring us some much needed rainfall. And then finally looking ahead at our kind of seasonal outlook here. And so this is for October through December. Obviously, we've already covered part of the October period, but again, not as warm, but warmer temperatures expected to continue. And then not much confidence in the precipitation forecast. So except for Southwest Missouri, right now we're kind of looking at equal chances for either wetter or drier conditions. And so hopefully we can get some more rainfall in that forecast, but for now it looks like we'll have to wait another week. But other than that, that's all I've got for today. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Zach. As always, we greatly appreciate you sharing information. I always like to look forward to what the next 3 months are predicted to be. And I don't mind the little bit warmer temperatures, but I sure wish we could have some rain. It really could help our trees and bushes and perennials that we leave in over the winter. So thank you very much for always being here for us. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to Traven Crocker. I've asked her to turn on her video so that you could see what she looks like for those of you that are down in the southeastern section of the state. So Traven, tell us just a little bit about yourself and we'll go from there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Traven Crocker, the new horticultural specialist, field specialist for Butler and the surrounding counties. I can't list them all, but I cover 9 counties in the southeast. But I want to encourage you to contact me with any challenges you guys are facing or questions you may have about home gardening or commercial horticulture. I'm here to help with that and troubleshoot with anything. So I look forward to working with you, and feel free to swing by the office, the University of Missouri Extension office located in Poplar Bluff, anytime.
Thank you, Traven. Greatly appreciate it. And she has actually stepped in and stepped up because the first question that we're going to answer here, as soon as I can get everything organized, is we had a question that came in that had an insect on their grapes. And it specifically was, it's a green grape leaf that shows it's been folded in on itself. She opened it, and on the inside, she saw this larva that you can see right here. And we weren't exactly sure what it was. She described it as about 5/8 inches in length, but it varied depending upon the size that they were, depending upon the leaves size that they were in. And she wasn't sure exactly what it was. And so I posted that out to all the hort folks, hoping that we could try to figure some of this out. And the person that stepped up was Traven. She actually did a little bit of searching for the information. So I give her credit, only being here since last week was her first week, and she's already stepped up. So she's going to be great for us here in southeastern Missouri. So what she actually found, and I offered if she wanted to present, and she said, "Oh, let me see how it's done," which is perfectly fine. So essentially, what once she kind of gave a description of what she believed it could be, and I did send this over to our Grape and Wine Institute, but unfortunately, we didn't hear back from them. So we're going to assume that this is what the insect is. We believe. Because it's translucent, you can kind of see through it, because it did have two black spots on it as well. Traven was able to find that it could be the grape leaf folder, which is this picture on the left side, and you can see how it kind of, that leaf is kind of folded back on itself there. And so the larva is going to be on the inside. I then continued to do some additional researching, and I found this one from University of Kentucky. It also showed a translucent type of an insect with the two black dots. So if we go back to the original picture, this looks a little translucent to us, and also I could see two black spots there. So we're going to assume that this could potentially be the insect itself. The person who sent us the request also had two additional pictures. The second and third photos, is what she said, were on the leaves that were already turned brown. And so here's this first picture where the leaf is kind of folded up on top of it a little bit. She pulled that one back, and this is the cocoon that she found underneath of that. And so she's just wondering if that's a more mature stage of the larva. And we're going to say that yes, it probably is. And it will probably come out as a moth at some point. And then Gwen's going to drop into the chat box two different publications that we were able to find, and hopefully you can read additional information on that. So I just want to say thank you, Traven, for doing that, and appreciate it a whole lot. And so our next question, let me get to where I need to go here. Sorry, guys. Is going to be, I believe, let me see here. Okay, so Dave Trinklein is on, and he always gives us wonderful, fantastic information. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about the coloring of the trees and the leaves, and why do they change colors. And so, Dave, we're happy that you're with us as always.
Well, thank you
want to
very
go
much.
ahead?
I'm happy to be with you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
We are about to be privileged enough to witness a phenomenon that happens only once a year. And it's kind of like opening a Christmas present from your secret Santa. You never know what's in there until you open it. And the same thing is true with fall leaf color. I'll subtitle this, "It's Not Easy Being Green," in deference to Kermit the Frog, because the color green has a lot to do with fall foliage color. First question we need to quickly ask, why are leaves green? They're green because of the chlorophyll molecule, which we know to be responsible for accepting the energy from the sun and then helping in the process of photosynthesis to convert it to a sugar. If you extract this, which is a basic plant physiology 101 experiment in a test tube, you can see it is in true green. That said, the chlorophyll is contained in primarily the mesophyll cells of the leaf, the spongy mesophyll cells and the palisade mesophyll cells, but they overwhelmingly override everything else in the leaf, causing the leaf to appear green. Oddly enough, as important a compound as it is, chlorophyll is relatively short-lived in leaves. It's continually being replaced as it breaks down. This is a rather staggering statistic in that 1,000 million tons of chlorophyll are biosynthesized and degraded every year on Earth. We switch now to the reason that chlorophyll is not seen during the winter. And this has to do with the process by which woody plants prepare themselves for winter. It's a two-step process. The first is they must go dormant. This is triggered by day length. And then the second is after they're dormant, they need to harden. And this is caused by gradual exposure to colder and colder temperatures. If you look at the anatomy of a leaf, at the point where it attaches to a stem, the node, we see that in the fall of the year, in response to shortening days and lengthening nights, an abscission layer forms. Abscise means to cut, and that's exactly what the abscission layer is going to do. It's going to allow the leaf to be removed from the plant as the tree goes dormant. Closer up look at the abscission layer, you can see perhaps that the vascular tissue is constricted, meaning that whenever the abscission layer forms, and that's just prior to separation, there is a blockage of material into or out of the leaf. So there is yet chlorophyll in the leaf, photosynthesizing, but there are no raw materials coming in to replenish it when it breaks down. That said, the primary plant pigments in a leaf are chlorophyll, as we mentioned, and then two accessory pigments called xanthophyll and carotenoids, yellow and orange in turn. These are in the leaf, but cannot be seen because they're being overwhelmed in dominance by the green chlorophyll. So when the chlorophyll starts to break down, and there's no avenue of bringing in fresh material to replenish it, we start seeing these carotenoids and xanthophylls. It's at that time then, whenever the sugars being manufactured by the chlorophyll remaining in the leaf until it breaks down are turned into pigments called anthocyanins. These are the reds, dark reds, purples, and so forth. And again, all of this is going on within the plant leaf and happens whenever dormancy is triggered. So the factors affecting fall foliage color are heavily dependent upon the species of plant in question and weather conditions. If you look at some of the plant species, the maples are really the rock stars of fall foliage color. Sugar maple, especially red maple. The hickories probably are underlooked in importance. They're usually a golden color. Tupelo is crimson, sweet gum, multiple of colors. So it depends a lot on the plant species with regard to the colors that are going to be visible. Equally important would be weather conditions. Two factors are quite influential, and the first would be light. Light causes those materials still in the leaf to manufacture sugars. Those sugars are trapped in the leaf because of the abscission layer, and then they form anthocyanins, which is a couple of metabolic steps beyond sugar. Bright light is needed for brilliant colors. Temperature also is very important. Warm, sunny days and cool, I have that underlined, not cold, not freezing, cool nights favor sugar production that is then converted into these plant pigments. So, bottom line, we get to see this only once a year, and now is the time to go out and enjoy nature's treat. Along river bluffs, this is taken in River Bluff across from Jefferson City, down Highway 94, is a prime area because of the predominance of sugar maples in those limestone bluffs. Just an excellent place to see fall foliage color. Nice day trip down 94 and back, and hopefully you'll enjoy some nice foliage. There are other places as well that we happen upon, especially the maple trees, and to a lesser extent, perhaps the hickory trees and so forth, but happen all over. So bottom line is we encourage you to go out and to look for the fall foliage. We're just right at the peak of time, usually about the 3rd to 4th week of October. And I'll close with a quote from the French philosopher Camus, who says that autumn is a second spring when every leaf is a flower. And again, the neat thing is this is never the same 2 years in a row. So I have, Debbie. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Dave. I really like that quote at the end. It is a second spring when you think about it. So I always appreciate your information that you share. It's always enlightening for me, especially. So thank you very much. And so next,
question.
Okay, go ahead.
First. The question that came in, Dave, is a bright street light next to a tree seems to affect the leaves that are delayed dropping off on that side. Is that because the tree senses the extra light as prolonged daylight, which delays the formation of that abscission layer?
Right on, A+. That's exactly what happens. And there are stories I can relate on campus where new security lights, brighter in intensity, were installed, and we lost a lot of trees because they couldn't go dormant. So that's exactly what's happening. And it's one of those things that usually the tree in time will trigger the dormancy. But if it's delayed too long and we get super cold weather fast, that's not good news for the tree. But that's exactly what happens.
Great, thank you. So what I'd like to do next is to go ahead and have Katie come on. She is going to talk about pumpkins and gourds, and I always consider her the pumpkin lady, and she knows her stuff. So Katie, what do you have to share with us today?
All right. Are you seeing it?
Yes, I am.
All right. So everybody knows that if you've been around me very long, that pumpkin, squash, and gourds are my favorite crop. So today it's October, so it's definitely pumpkin time. So my first question is, what's the difference between a pumpkin and a squash? And if anybody wants to type that in the chat, I will let you do that, and I'll visit that when we're through. But if you can tell me what the difference is. There are actually 4 species of cucurbits that fall in that pumpkin, squash, gourd category that we typically see as fall decorations. They're classified by their stem structure and the fact that they don't normally cross-pollinate. And as you can see by this picture, there's a wide array of colors, shapes, sizes. So cucurbita pepo is the most common one. So that's our traditional jack-o'-lantern pumpkins. So if you like to carve them for Halloween, those traditional jack-o'-lanterns fall in that. Also our summer squash. So our zucchini and crooknecks and patty pans and yellow squash. Those summer squash all fall into that. And it also is a lot of our ornamental gourds that we like for our fall decorations. So the little gourds, the little mini pumpkins, a lot of times fall in cucurbita pepo. And you can see here some of the stems. So typically when they're mature, they are hard and solid throughout, but size can vary. They can be little and long, they can be short, and they can be huge around. And so there's a lot of variation in this group, and lots of color variation. So lots of different types. Cucurbita maxima, these are our giant varieties. They have soft, hollow stems. So these are not ones you necessarily want to pick up by their stem. They like cooler temperatures and generally have longer maturity dates. So it takes them a lot longer to mature. Sometimes we can do just fine growing them here, but sometimes they're just not as productive maybe, or struggle when we have it hot. And also these are the type that they grow the world record weights in pumpkins. These are the Cucurbita maxima. And we will not grow a world record one here in Missouri because our summers are too hot. There are many edible varieties. And once again, you can see a wide array of colors. Machata, Cucurbita machata. So if you buy a can of pie pumpkin, it is going to be this variety. So these are used for commercial tanning. So our canning, they are the ones that are tan on the outside, but if you cut into it, it's bright orange on the inside. So these are what we would purchase if we are buying canned pumpkin. These have a very hard stem and typically that small diameter. So most people are familiar with butternut squash. That is in this group also. And then Cucurbita angiosperma. They've changed that name. It used to be mixta, and sometimes you still see mixta. These are traditionally squash shaped. Some are not. They can be striped, solid, or a mix of colors again. So the variety I'm showing here is Cushaw. And honestly, that's what I grew up with as pie. We always had Cushaw pie, never had pumpkin pie, and it's still what I make pie out of. And then we have a few others. And sometimes we see these in the fall market, is the Lagenaria species, the birdhouse gourds, dipper, bushel, swan, all of these. They have they're green when we pick them, once that shell matures, and then we can dry out over winter, and then they become these crusty kind of moldy looking things. And we can clean those up and do all kinds of craft projects with them. The other interesting thing about them is they have a white flower. So they bloom at night because they're pollinated by moths. So something a little different. Loofah, those immature stages can be eaten, but they're harvested later when the outer shell is dry, and then they're soaked and used as natural sponges. And some other ways we classify things. Summer squash, mostly fresh market, and we harvest those when they're immature compared to our pumpkins, and winter squash are harvested when they're mature. Something else we can do, squash blossoms. So I took this picture at a farmer's market where they were selling squash blossoms to eat. And then our winter squash. So lots of varieties fall in that winter squash, and many more than are listed here. So acorn, buttercup, butternut, Hubbard, spaghetti, and just so many more. Those are all harvested when mature. The great thing about winter squash is that they stay good for long periods of time. So they are great for keeping. And that's why traditionally they were grown in many ways, because as a food source for us and also for livestock, because of their ability to keep so long as they are prevented from freezing. And then pumpkins, typically we think of those a lot of times as more on the ornamental squash and gourds. And once again, they are harvested when mature. So how many of you answered if The difference between squash and pumpkin.
There was actually only one response, and it was not sure if there is a botanical difference, rather size, shape, and color.
And that's exactly right. The terms can actually be interchangeable. You can call everything a pumpkin or everything a squash and be perfectly correct. Although a lot of times it used to be that pumpkins were thought of as orange and round. However, as you can see by some of those pictures I showed, they are come in so many colors nowadays that any of those terms are correct. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you, Katie. Always interesting to hear because each time you talk about the pumpkins, and I'm classifying that as huge, the gourds, whatever, that there's always something, a little new nugget of information I learn whenever you present on that. So thank you. Gwen is going to talk to us about how to save your geraniums from this year to next year. And I'll be honest with you, horticulture is this vast industry out there. And we can't know everything, but what makes us good is that all of us across the state as horticulture specialists have little niches of knowledge that we know that some of us don't know. And I didn't know that you could actually save your geraniums from one year to the next. And at the end, if it's not addressed, I have a question for Gwen as well. But Gwen, let's go ahead and see what you've got to say about this. I'm really curious.
Thank you, Debbie. Yes, I'm Gwen Funk, and I'm up here in Northwest Missouri. And I found out about this. I used to be a school teacher, and I remember overhearing someone in the teacher's lounge talking about getting their geraniums ready to store for the winter. And I was like, what? What is going on with this information? So I kind of dug into it a little bit. And since then, I've been able to keep I have some geraniums that I've had probably 10 years or more. And it's just really kind of a fun thing to do. So we're saving our special geraniums. I don't know about you, but I always get attached to my plants in the winter or in the summertime. And then in the fall, I'm like, oh, they end their life cycle or the frost takes them out. And it's just like kind of a sad time. But then some of them we can keep going. So if they are a tender perennial, sometimes we can. I did a little bit of searching on just what a geranium is and looking at the natural history of them. And I came across an article that maybe they're not really true geraniums. And evidently there was a little bit of arguments going on between some of the taxonomy people that didn't know whether to call them geraniums or I hope I'm saying this right, pelargoniums, I believe is how that's pronounced. So their genus really is Pelargonium, but they were kind of, when they were brought to the United States or somehow in that transition, they looked very similar to our native geranium. So they were given that name and then they were reclassified and said, no, they're not. And another botanist in France said, no, I'm not accepting that. So everybody just kind of decided, no, we're not going to call them pelargoniums. We're going to call them geraniums, which I can say that much easier. So that's a good thing. Thomas Jefferson is really the one that's kind of credited with bringing them to the United States in 1786. He shipped some from France to the horticulturalist in Philadelphia, John Bartram. And that was the person that really kind of started getting geraniums more noticed and distributed throughout the United States. There are 4 basic types of geraniums. We have the common or zonal, which is our classic bedding plant that comes in several different shades and sizes. And I will note that there have been so many different hybridizations and breedings of these different things, these geraniums, that it's almost hard to tell them apart anymore. We have the regal and angel geraniums, which are more bushy with the large blossoms. An example would be the Martha Washington variety. And then scented leaf geranium. These are more of an heirloom plant. And then the ivy leaf geraniums, which they are kind of a trailing type of geranium that is really good to have in hanging baskets or maybe over a retaining wall or something like that. So there's quite a few varieties that we can choose from to suit almost any landscape need that we have here in the United States. All right, so different kinds of ways to hold them over the winter. The first one is called, I'll just call the dormancy method. And this is a method that you can use if you are limited in space or if you don't have a lot of light in your house. Basically what you do is you will trim back the plant to about 1/3 of its original size. So trim it back quite a bit. And then you're going to either remove it from the ground, dig it up, or if it's in a pot, you can just uproot it from the pot, not yank it, but gently remove it. And then shake off all the excess dirt, and you can hang it upside down and just let the air dry the roots. Or you can store them in a paper bag like you see here in the picture. Both of those methods work really well. A friend of mine, she doesn't even hang them upside down. She just kind of plops them on a shelf out in her garage. And they need to be kept cool, 45 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and relatively dark. So you don't want to get them too warm and you don't want them to get cold. If they freeze, that's not going to be a good thing for you. You do need to monitor for mold, or if it's too moist and they can get moldy, but they also can wither and dry out if there's not enough moisture. So you want to kind of look at them every month or so, every few weeks. If they look kind of dry and shrivelly, you can spray them with some water. I read also that you can soak the cutting, the part of the plant that you're hanging, you can soak that in a bowl of water for an hour and then let it dry out again. And that helps with some of the preservation of it. But because of the fleshy stems, they are able to kind of store enough energy that they can come back out in March. So once it starts warming up again in the springtime, you can bring them out of dormancy, repot them, and then just gradually introduce them back outside. And by May, you should have a pretty decent plant again. But you do need to protect them from frost. All right, another way that you can keep your geraniums over winter is simply bring them back inside. Prune them to about 1/3 again. You may need to refresh the potting mix. And then try to find a really bright, sunny location. They need at least 6 hours of bright light, more if you can. The ones that I bring in, I have them in a southeast window, which gets a lot of light, but they still get really leggy in the winter. But just be patient, because just keep them going. And then in March, you can kind of prune it back and then again, gradually move them back outside. And by May, you should have a really nice plant again. That's probably the easiest method if you have the space and the light. And then the other thing that you can do is take your healthy plant and make cuttings from them. So you would just take healthy stems, and you need about a 3 to 4 inch size and length cutting. You'll remove the lower leaves. You can use rooting hormone if you want. It's not necessary because they do root pretty easily. And then place those cuttings in loosely covered pots. But you do want to watch for excess moisture, because geraniums tend to be prone to fungi and to bacteria that like moist conditions. So if it gets too moist, then that can cause some rotting on your stems. You want them in bright light, but indirect light. So direct light may be a little bit too harsh for the young cuttings. And then they will grow all winter long. And by May, guess what? You'll have a nice plant to grow again. So your general care for these plants, they do prefer cooler temperatures. So you'll want to keep them in a cool place. You do not want to put them up against a heating vent or anything like that in your house. So keep them in a cool place. You'll want to monitor regularly and adjust your care so that if they need a little bit more water, or if they're getting too wet and you're getting mold. If you do see any mold or anything like that, get rid of it. You don't want it to spread to any other plants that you're trying to overwinter. And then I just put a picture here of the native geranium, the Geranium maculatum. This is also called cranesbill geranium. This is our native one that grows, and you can kind of see the relationship between the leaves and the flowers and kind of understand why they had that argument about the names. So Debbie, that's what I've got.
Great, thank you. Really interesting to know that there are several different ways that you can actually save geraniums from one year to the next. And I'm gonna have to tell my mom about it as well. So my question for you is, I know we have our regular traditional stem cutting propagated geraniums that we can buy, but we also now have seed geraniums. Can you save seed geraniums just like you would a regular traditional geranium? If you're answering, I'm not hearing. Are you still there, Gwen? Okay.
Here.
Oh, I
So-
hear you. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. The publication that is in the chat from aggiehort.amu.edu that
Okay.
talked about collecting seed and doing the seed geraniums. So you would be able to get that answer, I think, from that
Okay.
source.
Great. Appreciate that. Thank you. Next,
Yes.
we're gonna move on to Jennifer. Jennifer is going to talk about what to do with overwintering and winter protection for lavender if you've got some growing in your garden area.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. So the question is, should I cover or not cover? Well, we spent 3 years learning a lot about lavender. And what we did was in Kirksville, the first year, I left 3/4 of a row uncovered. And you can see that in that row at the top of the photo. You can kind of see the tips of plants sticking up. That was left uncovered. And after that winter, nearly all those plants were dead. During the second year of the study, our colleague Kelly McGowan in Springfield left the entire plot uncovered, and 3/4 of her plants were dead after that winter. So we learned that yes, lavender plants need to be covered and expect some damage or loss if you do not cover them. This is what we used. It is a row cover, sometimes called a frost blanket. And we purchased ours from Johnny Select Seeds, but local garden centers, particularly like family-owned garden centers, often have them on a large, have row cover on a large roll, and they will cut the amount that you would like to purchase. So you don't necessarily have to purchase a great big roll from a company. You can find a smaller garden center store in your area and see if they have it on a roll, and then just cut the amount you need. And then we did purchase stakes. So you can purchase those also from a garden center or from a garden company. And you can see the lavender I have in rows here at the Adair County Extension Office in Kirksville are covered. And in the row, the closest row here from the left, it would be the row that you see a lot of holes. So whenever I lost plants, we pulled them out, and then what you see one that's covered right there. So that's what I do. If I have like one plant and everything around it was dead and pulled out, we cover that one plant with a little piece of row cover. So you can cut your row cover or frost blanket to the size that you need. And then we covered our rows in December. So after several nights of really cold temperatures, you want them to go through that cold and be exposed and acclimate to the cold. We cover them in December. The first year we covered around December 30th, and then last year it was around December 14th. So we just kind of watch the weather, and when temperatures are going to dip down into the single digits and we're going to have rain, snow, some kind of precipitation, that's when I get them covered. So we knew that we were expecting snow when we went out and covered. And what we learned from this project is it's not really the cold temperatures that will kill the plant, because there were times when in late November, early December, the plants were exposed to the teens and even into the single digits, but there was no precipitation and they were fine. Okay, so they will tolerate the cold. what happens is rain or snow, or rain gets down into the woody tissue and then it freezes and snow gets in there. So that woody tissue will crack. And I did have a lot of that cracking, almost similar to southwest injury on a tree where you see the big splits. And so that's what's going to happen is the moisture is going to get down into that woody tissue and it's going to split it open. And by covering, we're protecting the plants from that moisture. So again, it's really not the cold that affects the plants. It's the moisture getting down into the woody tissue along with the cold. And so that's just showing you us covering the plot. We use two different types of stakes. We use some plastic stakes and we use metal stakes. And I will tell you, my favorite are the metal stakes. We had a lot of issues with them, the plastic ones heaving up out of the ground the first year. Then I purchased a lot of metal stakes, and I did have some issues with the metal stakes popping up out of the ground, but not near as bad as the plastic. So I would recommend you get the metal stakes to stake down your row cover or frost blanket. And I used hoops, and Kelly used hoops in Springfield, and you at least need, I feel like you at least need a hoop on each end of the row if you have rows of lavender. And I tie the row cover to the hoop like you see here in the photo. So I am tying it at each end of the row there. And then we are staking it about every 18 inches or so. So it's really important to get it staked down really well. This is what I want to see when I look out the window of my extension office at the lavender plot. That's what I want to see. I want to see it all covered and no plants sticking up out of the ground. This is what I don't want to see. And so this has happened to us actually a few times. Here in Northeast Missouri, we are called particularly Kirksville, the ice box of Missouri. And we often get blizzard-like winds and just strong snowstorms with just very strong winds. And even though I thought I had everything staked down really well, the winds just get hold of that row cover and the row cover will come off. And so this is what happened during a very strong snowstorm. So here you see the plants up close in that snow. That is what you don't want to have happen. That snow will get down into the woody tissue, and it will cause damage. It will kill them. Here you see the stakes, both the metal and the plastic stakes, heaved up out of the ground, and that was part of our problem. Is that the stakes had been heaving up. We had the strong winter winds, the blizzard-like conditions, and it just ripped those row covers right off. Now, a few other options that you can use are woody, some kind of wood mulch, like a cypress type of a mulch, or straw. I have one big lavender plant in a raised bed at my house, and it has been there for about 5 years. And every year I just get a bag of mulch and I cover it all up with mulch. And that plant has survived several winters. I believe that we're going into our 5th year with this plant. And so that's what I do. So if you have just 1 or 2 plants or a few plants scattered here and there among the landscape, you're not going to be able to use row cover, or probably don't want to. So you could just get a bag of mulch, pile that on top of the plant, and hope for the best. And here in the icebox of Missouri, it is working so far. You can even try straw. I've not used straw around lavender, but I have tried straw around some other vegetable type plants like rhubarb here, and it does work. So those are 2 other options you can use if you have just a few plants, like I said, scattered here and there around the landscape. But if you are raising or growing a lot of lavender in rows, we really do recommend that you protect it with some kind of particularly row cover or frost blanket, and have it staked down really well, and go out and check those stakes periodically to make sure that they are in the ground, they're not heaving out. And that's what I do. I will walk down the rows about once a week during the winter and make sure those stakes are in the ground. And if they're not, I push them back in. And if anybody has any questions on growing lavender and frost protection or winter protection for lavender, just reach out to me or my other colleagues that have worked on this project, and we would be glad to answer any questions that you have. And that's hope. And this is what we hope to have the following spring after we get through a winter. So if you cover your plants and they're not exposed to moisture, hopefully you will have beautiful looking lavender like you see here in the photos. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Jennifer. That middle picture that you had in that last slide was simply gorgeous. And so real quick, I know we're getting late here, but I really want to talk a little bit about planting your spring bulbs, just simply because I know if we wait until next month, it might be a little too late to do that. So spring bulbs, you want to go ahead and plant them now. You need 10 to 14 weeks of cooler temperatures in order for that plant to actually do its flowering. Of course, plant them in the fall when the soil temperature is below 60 degrees Fahrenheit at the planting depth of where the bulb needs to be. And I'll have a picture of that here. Well-drained soil so the bulbs won't rot. We don't want them to sit in really moist soil all winter long. If you need to, you can amend the area where you're planting your bulbs with compost or peat moss. You can add bulb fertilizer if you so choose, but if you do, it's going to be predominantly more, and it's a special fertilizer that will say that it's for bulbs, and it really will have a little bit more phosphorus in it than nitrogen, of course, just simply because the phosphorus is going to help that bulb with its root growth. You want to plant the bulb at least 2 to 3 times the height of the bulb is how deep that bulb needs to go. So 2 to 3 times the height is how deep you'll plant it. So here is a really nice graphic from North Carolina State University. It kind of gives you the early, mid, and late blooming different bulbs that we can grow here in Missouri, and those are all listed. And you can then see how deep, wherever that bulb depth is in this particular picture, actually shows you about how deep they need to go. And so it's really interesting to look at some of these differences, especially when we're looking at tulips and daffodils, about where that depth needs to be. And of course, it seems that the taller the plant is, the deeper the bulb actually probably should be planted, except for the allium that's towards the end right there. So some of the major bulbs that we grow here in Missouri are the daffodils, also called narcissus. They're really adapted to our Missouri weather, and they will bloom year after year after year. Tulips, they're not completely adapted to our Missouri weather because it does get a little warm for them at times. They will need to be replanted every couple of years, so keep that in mind. Hyacinths, I do see them growing here in Missouri. They don't tolerate Missouri weather well, and they really need to be replanted almost 1 year after another if you want that beautiful, bold vibrancy of its color in the spring. Some of the minor bulbs are listed here. I've got pictures associated with them. I think there's only one that I don't have. And I've seen where the pictures that I've been able to try to track down the let's see, the Siberian quill, which is really interesting. The snowdrop is very interesting. Notice it's flowering when there's actually snow on the ground, which I think is pretty cool. Many of you, if you've been following us, know that Katie Kammler and myself went on a professional development trip over to Holland. I was not a fan of tulips before I went, but I am a fan now. And I actually purchased these bulbs here. I have them shipped directly from Holland. They're sitting over there on the other side of my office. And I'm hoping to get those in the ground here shortly. But with the weather prediction of being dry with very little rain coming, one of the things I know what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to water the area where I want my bulbs to be planted because one, I won't be able to dig down deep enough because the ground will be so hard. But the other thing is I do want to make sure that I get some moisture. So I'll go ahead and I'll water there. I'll let it dry for a number of days so that they're not sitting in really damp, wet soil so that there will be less chance of the bulb rotting. But hopefully next year these will come up. They'll look beautiful. I'm excited to have these bulbs here, and if so, I'll make sure that I show pictures of them next year in the spring after they've bloomed. What I'm really looking at is the height. This one's 20 inches tall from the ground up to the top of the flower bloom. The blushing impression is a little bit taller, so I'll put these in the front and these in the back and clump them as groups. Also, what's interesting with the blushing impression is it's a 5-inch tall bloom. So from the bottom of the bloom to the top of the bloom is 5 inches, and that's really big for a tulip. So I'm really looking forward to having these tulips next year. So hopefully I can follow the directions I just talked about, and I'll have some really nice blooms and some flowers to show you for next year. So thank you everyone for sticking on with us. If you next month, we will be here on the third Wednesday of the month, so we hope to see you then. And remember, you can always go out to youtube.com/MUIPM, and you'll be able to see this again if you so choose, or you'll be able to watch our snippets that we will have out there for people to see as well. So thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. And until we see you next month, so long.